At 2:17 in the morning, Cora woke up completely paralyzed with something heavy sitting on her chest. She couldn't move, couldn't scream for help, and as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized what was sitting on top of her. It wasn't a human. And worst of all, this wouldn't be her last encounter with the unexplainable. You won't want to miss this one. At around 2:17 in the morning, one night in 2013, a 22-year-old woman named Cora suddenly woke up in her apartment bedroom, unable to move a single muscle in her body. She was laying there on her back, and she could feel this incredibly heavy pressure pushing down on her chest, making it difficult for her to breathe. And as Cora's eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized there was this dark, shadowy mass that appeared to be sitting right on top of her. Now, Cora's boyfriend, Garrett, was sleeping right beside her, completely oblivious to what was happening. Cora is trying desperately to call out to him to wake him up, to get any kind of help, but she just couldn't make a single sound. It was like her voice just wouldn't work. And she's laying there completely paralyzed, struggling to breathe with this thing on her chest, and she just begins thinking that she is going to die right here in her very bed. And this terrifying experience just went on and on. Cora couldn't move, she couldn't speak, she couldn't do anything at all to save herself. Finally, sunlight began to creep into the bedroom through the window, and the pressure suddenly lifted. Whatever the black mass was just vanished, and Cora could finally move again. Immediately, she sat up, gasping for air, which finally woke Garrett. And when Cora frantically tried to explain what had just happened to her, Garrett just rolled his eyes and dismissed the whole thing and basically told her that, "Hun, it was a nightmare. Go back to sleep. Just don't even with me." But Cora knew that what had happened wasn't just some bad dream. I mean, she could literally still feel the weight that had been pressing down on her chest. And at this point, Cora's really starting to wonder if there's something seriously wrong with her, or maybe something wrong with the apartment that they just moved into. You see, just a few weeks earlier, Cora and Garrett had sublet this partially furnished apartment. And basically, from the very first day they moved in, strange things started happening. Like, Cora would go into the kitchen to get a drink of water, and she would notice all the cabinet doors were wide open. Initially, she assumed that she'd left them open herself and had forgotten about it. But this kept happening over and over again. And they had a pit bull named Faith who started acting really weird. As an example, she'd be laying in the living room, calm and relaxed, and suddenly she'd jump up and rush to the bathroom, just growling and snarling like crazy at absolutely nothing. When Cora would go check what Faith was so upset about, she'd see the bathroom light was on and nobody had been in there. I mean, this dog was clearly seeing or sensing something that Cora could not. There was also this old radio CD player combo that had been left behind by previous tenants. Those big bulky things from the late 90s that, you turn a dial for the volume and to change stations. And so Cora would actually be listening to her country music while doing dishes, and suddenly the radio would start playing Justin Bieber's Baby, like out of nowhere. It would just switch from a country station to Justin Bieber. Maybe the spirit is a belieber. But to set the record straight, Cora had never been a Justin Bieber fan and would never have intentionally listened to that song. So she'd go over and reset the radio back to her country station and then just go about her business like any other day. But then 5 minutes later would go by and she'd hear the same song over and over coming from the radio again. And this happened constantly, day after day. And so one day, Faith started growling at the kitchen door, and when Cora went to check what was going on, she found every single cabinet in the kitchen open, including the oven door. And so Cora's thinking, I know sometimes I'm absent-minded, but there's no way that I opened all these cabinet doors and just left them like this. So this kind of weird stuff, it just kept happening for weeks and weeks. And so fast forward about 3 weeks, the landlord shows up one day to collect the rent. Cora definitely had some questions she'd been wanting to ask him, because when they first moved in, she had noticed there was this yellow ribbon tied around a tree outside with teddy bears and stuffed animals placed all around it. She had assumed it was some kind of memorial for a military person or something, but wasn't entirely sure. But now, with all the strange things happening in the apartment, Cora wanted to know more about this. And so she asked the landlord about it, and what he told her was absolutely heartbreaking. The previous tenants who had lived in the apartment had a 12-year-old son who had just gotten a record deal. And to celebrate, they were having this big cookout in the yard. But during the celebration, someone across the street who had a gun somehow ended up shooting this poor kid, and he died right there by the tree. The landlord went on to explain that the reason the apartment was partially furnished was because after the boy died, his parents were so devastated that they split up, and they just abandoned most of their furniture, only taking their bedroom sets with them. So basically everything that had been left behind, including that radio that kept playing Justin Bieber, had belonged to this poor dead boy. After hearing this story, Cora really started thinking about maybe all the strange things happening in the apartment were being caused by the boy's spirit. I mean, it would explain why the radio kept playing Justin Bieber, who would have been really popular with a 12-year-old boy at the time, and maybe the cabinet doors and bathroom light, those were just ways for him to try and get attention. So later that night, Cora tried telling Garrett about what the landlord had said and that her theory about the boy's ghost. But of course, Garrett just got really annoyed at her and told her to grow up, basically, because ghosts aren't real, to stop with the nonsense. But even though despite his skepticism, all these things kept happening in the apartment, and Cora was also starting to have these really terrifying reoccurring nightmares. And in the beginning, the dreams always started the same way. It would be Cora running through this massive house being chased by something that she could not see. And then she'd wake up to that same paralyzing sensation with the heavy black mass just sitting on her chest, making it impossible for her to breathe or move. And again, folks, this would happen night after night. So Cora actually started researching dreams, trying to figure out if there was some way that she could control what was happening. And the next time she had the dream, instead of running away from whatever was chasing her, she turned around and started chasing it, and the dream changed. Cora would end up cornering this entity in a large kitchen, and she'd grab a knife and demand to see its true form. When confronted like this, the entity's face would start shifting between different people that she knew, her family members, co-workers, and friends. But no matter whose face it was wearing, it always had this terrifying, sharp-fanged smile. And it would step right to the knife Cora was holding and ask in this menacing voice, "Is this really what you want? You have no idea who I really am." And then the dream would always end the same way. Cora would wake up paralyzed with that black mass just sitting there camped on her chest. And during this entire period, the relationship between Cora and Garrett just kept getting worse and worse. They were constantly arguing, and there was this horrible, palpable tension in the apartment all the time. Eventually, they decided to move to a different apartment. And the crazy thing is, as soon as they moved out, everything stopped. No more weird cabinet doors opening, no more Justin Bieber on the radio. Well, not quite, but at least in that apartment. No more nightmares, no more sleep paralysis. Life had returned to normal for the most part. What's interesting is that this wasn't actually the first time Cora had experienced something strange. 5 years earlier, when she was 17 years old, something really strange happened to her. She had just gotten off work from her closing shift at the job she worked, and she and a group of her friends decided to go to this local park that had these really dense woods all around it. And so they park their cars back in this secluded section where there's a lot of woods, and then they all hike together down to this dried out creek bed. Now, at some point, Cora decided to separate from the group just a little bit, and she went and sat on this fallen tree by herself. And as she was sitting there, enjoying the night, she gets this really weird feeling. It was that kind of creepy sensation that you get when you're certain that someone's staring at you. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? It's pretty unmistakable. And so she's looking around, trying to figure out what's going on, but she doesn't see anything or anyone. And, she brushes it off, and she starts thinking to herself that, I'm alone, it's dark out, it's probably just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as this continues on for a few more moments, she eventually hears this really deep kind of guttural growl coming from somewhere nearby. And she starts looking around for the source of this, and she can't find it. And at one point she looks up and she sees these eyes staring right at her from the darkness. And the way these eyes look, it's obvious they're just too far apart to be something small like a raccoon. And they're actually about 5 feet above where she's sitting, which is actually pretty terrifying if you think about it. So that means whatever it's coming from has to be pretty tall. And at this point, Cora is frozen with fear. She can't move. She could hardly breathe. But whatever this is, it growls again. And a third time. And it just breaks her paralysis. She jumps up from where she's sitting and starts running as fast as she can toward where the cars are parked. And as she's running, her boyfriend at the time intercepts her and grabs her, and he's asking her, "Why are you running? What's going on with you?" And she just starts frantically telling him that something just growled at her from the tree and that they need to leave right now. They cannot stay there any longer. And he's like, whoa, calm down. And of course, instead of taking her seriously, he just starts taunting her like, "Ooh, Cora's scared. She saw a monster." For extra context, Cora's boyfriend at the time, he was this really tall guy, like 6'5", 190 pounds. And his friend who was with him was like about 5'10". He was shorter, but a lot heavier, kind of like a big, round, soft guy, like 300 pounds. And so as the boyfriend is continuing to taunt and make fun of Cora, something really strange happens. His friend suddenly grabs the boyfriend by the throat and actually picks him up off the ground, lifting him about 6 inches into the air. And keep in mind, the friend is shorter and not particularly strong, so this should have been physically impossible. But he's holding the boyfriend up in the air by his throat, and the entire time he just has this blank expression on his face, and he starts speaking aloud in a language that not only has nobody heard before, but it had this kind of weird snarling quality. TLDR, the voice wasn't his, and it didn't sound human. Cora, who was standing there watching the entire thing in front of her, gets this strong feeling that whatever she saw in the woods with the eyes is somehow connected to what's happening now with the friend. It's like whatever it was is now working through the friend to taunt her boyfriend in return. And this whole bizarre, terrifying exchange lasted a few moments, but to Cora, it felt like it would go on forever. And suddenly, the friend just drops the boyfriend and collapses to the ground himself. Everybody is freaked out by this point. They all scatter, rush back to their cars, desperate to get out of there as quickly as possible. But there's a bit of a twist, because as it would seem, Cora later learned that in the woods of this park, there had apparently been a witch's cabin at some point many moons ago, and that the park actually had a replica of it on display. It was like this small one-room cabin that visitors could walk inside. And according to local urban legend, this witch had been executed, as was common during that time period. And supposedly, her original cabin was still hidden somewhere deep in the woods. Now, looking back, was there truly a connection between that folklore and what happened to her that night? It's hard to say. But the only thing that Cora could summarize is that she believes she encountered a hellhound of some kind, or some kind of supernatural guardian to that area. Well, Fast forward another year after that park incident, and Cora had yet another strange experience. She ended up in the ICU at the hospital for a medical issue, and while looking out her window, she saw this woman surrounded by a beautiful, almost teal-colored light. The ICU was on one of the higher floors of the hospital, so it would have been impossible for somebody to have been walking around outside. And the creepiest thing is that Cora saw this woman at the exact time that code alarms started going off throughout the hospital. She firmly believed that what she saw was an angel of death coming to collect souls from the hospital. After recovering from whatever had put her in the ICU, her family moved into this house that was about 150 years old. It was so old that it was actually divided into servant spaces and master spaces, like houses used to be way, way back. And Cora's mom had always loved old houses and antiques, so she was thrilled to move into a place with so much history. Well, it wasn't long before strange things started happening there too. One of the first things that Cora noticed was that the planchet, that's the pointer part of a Ouija board from this collectible wooden Ouija board her mom owned, kept moving around the house on its own. They'd find it in completely different places than where it was supposed to be. Sometimes it would be on the floor next to this kind of cutout section of the built-in cabinets where the board normally sat, and they just assumed that, the cats must have knocked it down, but they'd find it in the living room and on the coffee table or even inside this milk churn in the dining room. And that was a lot harder to explain away. Then they started noticing that Salem, their all-black female cat, was always getting shut in the linen closets. Odd, but possibly an accident. But then Max, their black and white male cat, started getting locked in the attic. And that was really hard to dismiss because to get to the attic, there were two separate doors that the cat would somehow have to get through. And the attic wasn't insulated, so they always kept those doors closed to keep the rest of the house separate. Now, these first incidents were annoying and odd, and they happened a lot, but they were still pretty easy to brush off. This went on for about 6 months on and off. But then, the activity really started to intensify. Doors would slam on their own, and they'd hear what sounded like someone stomping through the house during both day and night. There were so many times when Cora was home alone, and she'd hear these noises and call her mom at work to see if she had come back to get something from the house. And it actually got to the point where her mom was telling her not to call unless there was really something serious going on. The most intense activity always happened between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Every single night, they'd hear things being dragged back and forth in the attic, along with what sounded like heavy work boots stomping around up there. And it always ended up the same way. They'd hear footsteps running to the door of the attic, and then down the 2 sets of stairs from the attic. Then, they'd hear this solid oak door at the bottom of the stairs being swung open and hitting the wall behind it. And that would be followed by Cora's mom coming into her room and asking her what the hell she was doing making all that noise. When Cora moved out at the age of 20, she didn't go back to the house for about a year. But then she had to go back one weekend to take care of her mom's animals while she was away. And during that weekend, the activity was exactly the same as it had been before she left. So she knew it wasn't just in her imagination. Well, as it turns out, about a year or 2 after that, Cora actually looked up that house online and was shocked to see that it was for rent for only $600 a month. Now, this was a full-size 4-2, 3-story house with a fenced-in yard, and so for $600 a month, it's either a cockroach-infested crap hole or there's literally a demon residing in it. Cora assumed that the paranormal activity must still be going on to have that kind of price tag. Even though her mom made a lot of expensive upgrades before leaving, it pretty much looked exactly as it was. For Cora, people throughout all of these experiences have tried to explain them away. Sleep paralysis, stress from being home alone, or too much of her imagination, working overtime, just fill in the blanks. But Cora firmly believes that she encountered 3 distinct types of paranormal phenomena. Some kind of supernatural guardian or hellhound, a traditional haunting, and something possibly demonic at the apartment that was attracted to her vulnerability. Whatever it may be, the black mass that had sat on her definitely wasn't the spirit of a boy who'd been shot. She believes it was something much darker, something that was using the tragedy of the boy's death as a way to get to her, and she's grateful she got out when she did. And because you guys made it to the very end of the episode, I want you to comment down below, "I ain't afraid of no ghosts," so that way I know who made it to the very end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy videos like this, where we deep dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.